And we're live. Sorry. Welcome everybody to this new edition of my series about the biggest self-help concepts. I've talked about motivation, inspiration, I've talked about procrastination, and one more ION word. Today we're going to talk about the big five. And so this series is about me brainstorming and basically brain dumping everything I know about specific topics, and hopefully learning something new as well. And this is a very interesting topic that I know quite a bit about, but I hope that I'm going to learn something new about that as well. My name is Nick Redmark. I'm a professional life coach. If you want to start your year strong, then consider in the link, there is a link in the description below. You can get a free hour of coaching with me. Just pick a date and a time, check out the description. But let's jump into it. So, the big five. What is the big five? The big five is one of the most reliable models in psychometrics, meaning one of the most statistically significant, measurable phenomena studied in psychology, and especially the measurements of psychology, the psychometrics. And basically, what is it about? It's a model of how of the dimensions of your personality. An example of another psychometric model would be, or model of personality, would be the Myers-Briggs, which has issues though. So Myers-Briggs is like, it's on one hand it's non-exhaustive, it doesn't describe the whole of your personality, and also it doesn't describe like the dimensions are not completely independent from one another. And if you want a good model of personality, that's what you want. You want to have dimensions that kind of exhaust the space of personality, and also that the dimensions need to be independent from one another as much as possible. Obviously, we are talking about the human brain, and it cannot be completely like clean. Psychological theory cannot be absolutely clean. Now, actually, let me reduce the volume for me a bit. The music is too high. Okay, let's jump into it. Big five. The big five. Let's start by mentioning what these big five personality traits are. So this model is also called OCEAN, which is an acronym for all these dimensions. So we start with openness. Then the next is conscientiousness. You might have noticed I talk a lot about this because it's extremely powerful. Extraversion. Then we have, why do you go up there? Can I move it before? Okay, extraversion. Agreeableness and Neuroticism. All right. Okay, let's talk about these dimensions individually. Openness is basically openness to ideas and experiences. There's a S missing. Let me zoom out a bit. So it's your capacity, or open people are willing to experience new things and have a different experiences, things that they are not used to, and they kind of think laterally and they keep on having ideas. And people who are low in openness, I don't know if what the right word is there, probably not closeness, but are more conservative, more happy with familiar situations, and not willing to kind of explore things too much. So on one hand you have kind of the explorers, and on the other hand you have the more conservative people. And there, something I should say is that there is a place, at least evolutionarily speaking, there are advantages to all dimensions, or to all positions on the spectra. Otherwise they wouldn't exist. Otherwise evolution would have selected them out, right? So these dimensions exist because all positions have kind of distinct advantages. And so, for example, open people are the people who might stumble upon new, interesting and powerful ideas, but they are also the ones who might wander around for nothing and kind of be inefficient. And closed people might efficiently run against the wall and not see it coming, or not be able to kind of turn because they want to avoid change. Conscientious people, conscientiousness is one of the highest predictors, psychologically speaking, I think after IQ, of success in life. Conscientiousness is the ability to do what one should do even if one doesn't feel like it. So if you're conscientious, sorry, if you're conscientious, you are dutiful, you are orderly, you are like, okay, this is what you should do, and then you just do it. And unconscientious people tend to be kind of non-conformists, so they don't want to conform to any like duty. And obviously in today's day and age, to be hardworking is an advantage, and so it's to a certain degree unlucky to be unconscientious, but there are ways to work around this, which I talk about in various videos. This is something that that affects me because I did the test and I'm extremely low in conscientiousness. And then the question is, okay, how did I manage to get a master's degree? How did I manage to kind of publish videos on a regular basis, and all these kind of things that are more characteristic of a conscientious person? Well, that's an interesting question, right? Like, I have videos about that, but to a certain degree it's about harnessing the strengths that come from the rest of your personality. And so, for example, I'm extremely high in openness, which means I can easily get interested in things, and I've always used that as a trick to kind of get myself to do what I had to do, you know, like instead of like forcing myself, I kind of like got intrigued by the thing, or managed to make myself intrigued, and has worked basically all the time. But let's move on. Extraversion is the is the classics. People know this the most. So introverted people enjoy more, gather more energy from staying alone, and extrovert people enjoy and gather more energy from staying with other people. And again, I would say there are advantages and disadvantages to both sides. I'm introverted, but not extremely. At least that's the result of the test. So something that needs to be said again is that these are predispositions, personalities, but this can be kind of detached from the skills that the people who have certain personalities develop. So an extrovert person will tend to be with people, and then as a consequence this person will learn how to deal with people in a more efficient way. But an introvert person can learn that too. You just have to push yourself consciously and actively to be more with people. So that's the good news. The layer of personality, of kind of the way you see the world and so on, and your predispositions is to a certain degree fixed. We can talk also about how these things kind of change over time, because they do a bit. But you can learn how to work around them, and the best approach really is not to kind of try to fix your weaknesses, because you cannot. What you do is you bound them, you avoid them from making your life spiral out of control, and you just bound those risks, and then you kind of invest a lot in your strengths. That's the best way to deal with this. Sorry. So agreeableness is the tendency to put other people first, and I guess it's this nurturing aspect of a mother, or I guess of a father who is very invested in the child, or nurses or people who kind of take care of other people, have an advantage from being agreeable. And these agreeable people are people who kind of don't mind conflict, don't mind like standing up for themselves, and kind of being in conflict with other people. Agreeableness can be kind of also kind of being impolite and not caring, and so both extremes have, again, ups and downsides. And then finally we have neuroticism, which is basically the tendency to suffer from threat, from risk. So if you if there is a certain degree of risk and you kind of it scares you and you don't want to be exposed to that, then probably you're more neurotic than someone else who doesn't feel that. And neuroticism unfortunately has a bad rep, just the word, because it has as a word it's charged with baggage coming from other psychological traditions. So even when talking, like the psychoanalysis talked about neurotic people, neurosis and so on, so it's associated with mental illness to a certain degree, but that's not what this concept is about. Neurotic people will tend to want to be safe, and there is there is definitely a place for people who want that, right? So because neurotic people will expose themselves less to risk, and risk it's risky, right? So there is a place for risk-averse strategies in society and in life. So we have this an overview of this big five. There are this interesting research by sorry about that. Research by psychologist Jordan Peterson has kind of revealed specific sub-traits. So each of these can be divided into 2 or I think 3 sub-traits. Let me see whether I remember this correctly. So openness can be divided into I think openness proper and intellect. And unfortunately I don't remember exactly what the 2 dimensions are, or what this means. I think one is really being open to experience, and the other is to kind of being interested in the world of ideas. Then conscientiousness is divided in orderliness, which is, I mean, as you can imagine, so tendency to want to see things in order, and industriousness, which is the tendency to just be doing things all the time. And what else? So extraversion, I don't remember. There's something like enthusiasm. I don't remember. I'm sorry about that. Maybe I can find it out. Let's see. Big 5. I mean, since the whole idea is that I I'm also doing this to learn something myself. See whether we can find this. I need to see subtraits. Is there anything? Relationships, measurements, critique. Subtraits. Subtraits. No, I'm not finding it. Maybe I find it online. Big 5 subtraits. Okay, maybe I should add here as a resource understandmyself.com, because this test, which is by Jordan Peterson, will allow you to know your traits and your subtraits. So you can learn a lot about also your subtraits there. Facets, perhaps it's this one. No. Okay, let's move on. I'm sorry about that, I don't remember. So agreeableness itself can be divided in politeness and I'm forgetting them. I thought I would find them. Let's see, where could one where could we find this? I want to know now. So Jordan Peterson, big 5 subtraits, because it's aspect scales. Here it is. Okay, so let me finish here. Openness to experience is openness and intellect. Conscientiousness, orderliness, industriousness, as we said. Extraversion and introversion, made up of the aspects of enthusiasm and assertiveness. Okay, let's add this here. Enthusiasm and assertiveness. So, and now we find out the truth about extrovert. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry, I mixed the two. So, wait. I'm moving things around. No, this is correct. Now, agreeableness. Agreeableness is politeness and compassion. Here it is. Compassion. Politeness and compassion. By the way, these mind maps that I'm doing are available in the description below. You can find the link to the mind maps. At least when the streamings are over. So, let's move on. Neuroticism is made up of the aspect withdrawal and volatility. So as you see here, neuroticism is the tendency, so it can be divided in the tendency to kind of to avoid things, to avoid the experiences that might be risky. And volatility is more emotional, like the emotional ups and downs. And so, yeah, these are the kind of sub-dimensions of these 5. And I think, if I remember correctly, there are also super dimensions. So there are like these 5 can be kind of grouped into 2 groups. If I remember correctly, the 2, this is also from a paper that I read from Peterson, and it's actually quite interesting because then it was related to kind of structures in the brain, and I think, yeah, okay, this is really interesting. We should find this out. Where did I find this? So Jordan, this was again Jordan Peterson. Dig 5 clusters, something like that. Meta traits, yes, the meta traits. So let's find this. Here we have it. Plasticity and stability. Yes, these were the two, I think. So isn't it interesting that what I like about this is that statistical analysis is slowly becoming an actual theory about how the brain works, and about what are the principles behind it. Why do these 5 traits exist at all? And I think the work of Peterson is kind of revealing a structure behind it. and so it looks like. Let me add them here. So we have plasticity and stability. And isn't it interesting that so we have both traits? So these things look like they are opposite, but both of them are like different traits, contain different traits. So let's find this out. I remember reading this, but I don't remember where the behavioral correlates. There we are. So extraversion and openness correlate with plasticity. Let's add this here. Extraversion and openness. And then when I'm done with this, we can kind of look at think about what this implies. Agreeableness, conscientiousness, and then minus neuroticism. Minus, why minus? Because it's the opposite. Okay, so what does this say about human, like being human here? So there is this thing called plasticity, which is extraversion and openness. So the tendency to go out, right? Go out, explore either the social space, which is this extraversion, and if we look at the specific subparts, enthusiasm and assertiveness. So this is plasticity, and then going out in the world of ideas and experience. So the social, the experiential, and the mind, ideal lives. So the plasticity is the capacity to basically explore these. And stability then is part of, okay, let's see, so agreeableness. That's interesting. That agreeableness would be part of stability. So if you kind of put others first, that makes you a more stable person. That's interesting. And conscientiousness, I guess, the way I think this might be true is that, so agreeableness, if you're agreeable, you're kind of tightly in a tightly knit social fabric, right? So you are not an individual that is kind of roaming alone. You are kind of part of something bigger, right? And conscientiousness, in a sense, could be seen as you being also again like attached to a set of constraints that which are your duty, your principles, the things that you should do, and so on. And then the opposite of neuroticism, which is emotional stability, is obviously related to stability. So let's look at it the other way. So as a disagreeable person, you're more like an individual separated from others. As an unconscientious person, you're also you're not bound by duty. You do what you feel like. And as a neurotic person, I guess you don't feel safe in the world too much, so you are kind of like on your own, and this is all instability. And so it's interesting, right? So there are these two traits, plasticity and stability. And now what they talk about is that there are kind of two, if I remember correctly, there are two neurotransmitters who are related to these two meta traits. Let's look at it. Here, this is interesting. So at the broadest level of description, variation in human personality appears to reflect engagement and restraint of behavior. Let's add these things. Probably it sounds very powerful. So engagement and restraint. So let me think about this. What is restraint connected to? The frequencies of acts were consistently positively correlated with plasticity and negatively correlated with activity. Okay, I'm jumping to conclusions too quickly. Okay, let me read the whole thing. Although initially believed to contain orthogonal dimensions, the Big Five personality taxonomy appears to have a replicable higher order structure, with the meta trait of plasticity reflecting the shared variance between extraversion and openness intellect, and the meta trait of stability reflecting the shared variance among neuroticism, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. Okay, shared variance meaning, okay, things vary independently, but to a certain degree they don't, and then there is a kind of a superstructure, which is what we were talking about, so plasticity and stability. These higher order traits have been theorized to relate to individual differences. In the functioning of the dopamine and serotonin systems, respectively. Okay, there we are. So plasticity is related to dopamine, and stability related to serotonin. Okay, let's add this one. This is sure that we got this correct. So dopamine and serotonin. And this is extremely interesting because what dopamine does is it's a motivational neurotransmitter. So that what dopamine makes you feel is the desire to do more, and it has to do with reward. So when you do something and it's rewarding, dopamine gets ejected and kind of strengthens the pathways, the neuronal pathways that generated the behavior, and that's what you experience as a craving or a motivation to do something. And so I guess people who are high in plasticity are more sensitive to dopamine. So you are more motivated to do things. And then serotonin, which is related to stability, gives you a feeling of satiety, satisfaction of enoughness, right? And so there are these two kinds of, in a sense, if you think about it, there are these two kinds of happiness, right? The happiness that comes from the enthusiasm of feeling like doing something, of like, yes, more. That's a kind of happiness. I feel like more because I liked it, I want more. And then the satiety, which is like, I liked it and I don't need anything else. Isn't it interesting? So there are these two things, and they are not the opposite of one another. They are like two different structures or functions of our brain. Serotonin makes you feel more like I have enough, and dopamine makes you feel like I want to act. And interestingly enough, it is possible to feel both at the same time, to feel like I am enough and I want to act, and it's okay, like both of them. You can live feeling both of them at the same time. And if you kind of feel threatened by the world, this is an experience that you can make by MDMA, by taking MDMA, because MDMA basically lets all the serotonin in your brain come out. So you can suddenly feel like the threat of the world has gone completely. You feel like you are enough. And this is completely unrelated from your capacity to solve problems. You're still motivated to solve problems, but you just feel like these problems are no threat to you. So it's really powerful to know that these two systems are independent, and both of them are necessary. And if you have a kind of an emotional problem, then you might be trying to solve it with the wrong kind of system, right? So certain problems cannot be solved by action. I'm sorry, I think I will have to stop soon because my throat is annoying. But anyway, so knowing about these two systems in your brain can help you understand, okay, where do I need to kind of work? Do I need to work on increasing my emotional stability? Or do I need to take action to solve an actual problem? Okay. I'm satisfied with what came out. I learned something myself. I hope the rare person who watches this all will agree. I think I have to go, so that's it. Thank you very much for watching, and see you soon with another live streaming about another book and another concept.